Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Holly Kuzmich. I'm Executive Director of the Bush Institute. We are so glad you are all here for this strategic dialogue discussion, promoting the health of women and girls through collective efforts. And I am pleased to have my co-chair for this dialogue discussion, Ambassador Deborah Birx, here with me. We'll turn to Debbie in just a minute. We have had a long and strong partnership between the Bush Institute and PEPFAR, and look forward to continuing that relationship. The work that we do at the Bush Institute related to this issue is something that I will, of course, raise today as part of this discussion, and it's the work we do on cervical cancer and its connection to women who are HIV positive, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But we are not going to limit our discussion to that today. We're really here to talk broadly and generally about the issues facing women and girls around the world, and all of the side effects that has when we do not give them great access to education, healthcare, economic opportunity, et cetera. We are thrilled to have three First Ladies with us here today. Let me introduce them. Her Excellency Kim Simplis Barrow, the First Lady of Belize. We have Her Excellency María Juliana Ruiz Sandoval, the First Lady of Colombia. And Her Excellency Sandra Granger from the First Lady of Guyana. And thank you to the rest of our group for being part of this today. Let me just do a couple quick housekeeping items before I get into the start of this discussion. First of all, in order to speak into your microphone, please make sure to press the button. The red light will come on. We can only have a handful of microphones on at any one point, so when you're done speaking, make sure you turn it off so that others can get a chance to weigh in. We will call on a few people. This is really a dialogue discussion, but if you would like to make a point, make a statement, raise a question for the group, please just turn your tent card up, and Debbie or I will make sure to call on you. So with that, let's get into the issues here. We know that women and girls hold equal and active role in society. Their communities and countries are more prosperous, but that's not always the case, obviously. And studies show that when girls are educated, there are improved outcomes for reducing poverty, maternal health, and lower rates of infectious disease, especially HIV. And we know that healthy, safe women are better able to contribute to the health and well-being of their families and communities. But we also know that around the world, women and girls face significant disparities when it comes to education, healthcare, economic opportunity, lack of legal protection, et cetera. More than 1/3 of women around the world have experienced physical or sexual violence at some time in their lives. In sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in 3 first sexual experiences among women is rape. Worldwide, we know that girls still lag behind boys in terms of being enrolled in school. And we know that lack of access to basic health care contributes to poor health outcomes, especially for young women and adolescent girls. And so with that as a baseline, we at the Bush Institute have been working significantly on an issue that is near and dear to our heart, which I just mentioned is the connection between HIV positivity and cervical cancer. And the more that we've gotten into that work, the more we've understood that we really need to start young in terms of addressing these issues at a young age in the countries in which we're working on. We know the reason we got into this issue is because women who are living with HIV are 5 times more likely to get cervical cancer. And that is what led to our partnership with Ambassador Birx and with PEPFAR, and the work we've been doing in sub-Saharan Africa and the work we'll continue to do there. But one of the other things we do at the Bush Institute, and it's the reason we have several First Ladies with us today, is that because our stewards are both George and Laura Bush, we have a First Ladies Initiative where we have worked with over 50 First Ladies from around the world to talk about how they can use their platform, because whether they like to know it or not, they really have a platform, and they are expected to take on issues within their country and around the world. And we saw Mrs. Bush do it while she was in office on issues of education, Afghan women, et cetera. And we know that First Ladies around the world are important champions on many of these issues. And so we are going to be undertaking even more significant work to tie the work that we do on First Ladies to the work that we do on global health. And that will start next year in terms of deeper partnerships that we will begin with First Ladies in Sub-Saharan Africa on issues of women's health, because we know that if we're going to tackle cervical cancer, we really have to start young and understand what are the risk factors that lead women, girls and women to be HIV positive and then to be at more risk for cervical cancer. So that's the platform we do our work on under the Bush Institute. Our conversation today is going to touch on three main topics that I will outline very quickly. The first is the issues facing young women and girls and the need for renewed support and sustainable interventions, the importance of public-private partnerships. We have several private sector partners here today and NGOs who can talk about that work, and then the value of women's leadership and how that can be brought to bear in terms of advancing these key issues. So with that, let me turn it to my colleague, Ambassador Birx.
Thank you, Holly. It's just a real privilege at the 15th year anniversary of PEPFAR to be sitting next to Holly and sitting next to the person who really represents, I think, really the person who changed the world forever in global health, and that's President Bush. I was in Africa before PEPFAR and before the Global Fund, and it was a very different place. And President Bush understood that connection between the health of a society and the security of a country. And I think that investment was so spectacular at the time. I was in Kenya when he made the announcement out in Kericho. I came back because I was in DOD at the time, and somehow DOD usually gets forgotten, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't. So I came with my 500-page PowerPoint to really convince them that Department of Defense should be an active partner in PEPFAR. And I think we forget that it was such a unique approach bringing the whole of government together. That was bold in itself, and then to say you're going to put 2 million people on treatment in less than 5 years when we didn't have the human capacity, the physical infrastructure, the laboratory tests, or many of the reasons why. There was a lot of reasons why it couldn't be done, and only one reason that it had to be done, and that was President Bush really felt like we were going to lose not only a whole generation, but the generation to follow. And it's just been a privilege to be part of PEPFAR for the 15 years. We've tried to stay very true to that results-based, now moving very much to outcome and impact-based analysis. And so if you go to our website, we have all 55,000 sites on the website with the results down to the site level available in a public sphere so that communities and project managers and district health officers have access to the same data at the same time. So community members can see what's being done as well as the government. And I think that has really been a really important part of PEPFAR. When we started looking at the data, as President Bush would always want us to do, we really saw that there was this youth wave in 90% of sub-Saharan Africa, a youth bulge in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa, where they have a bulge coming through, but a wave in all the other countries, and a really willingness at all of the countries to be bold and to take action. I'm still stunned that Malawi, who had the least, was the first to do B+, and say every pregnant woman deserves to thrive that has HIV to raise their child. And no more are we going to take mothers off of treatment after the birth of their child. No, we want the mothers to be there when the child is 15. And they are. And we can see that. And I think that was just an incredibly bold vision. But we started to see that 60% of the continent obviously was going to be under 20 by 2020. And then we saw the high risk for young women, particularly in the 15 to 24-year-old age range. And we frankly didn't know what to do. We could see all the problems and we didn't know what to do. So we really turned to the private sector to come and help us. And so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Girl Effect out of the Nike Foundation, and then an independent entity to Gilead and Vive, and importantly Johnson & Johnson came with us to tell us and help us do market segmentation of the girls so that we could tailor messages that they could hear and process, and that we could hear from them about how they wanted to receive information. It was a game changer. So in the countries, 10 original, now additional countries, we have a program that puts the girl at the center and her voice critical to the process and how we plan and what we do and how we change and how we modify the program to meet their needs. And it has, I've never tried strictly a structural intervention. I'm a physician that came very much out of take this pill, we'll be better in the morning. So it was a little bit unnerving to me to do a completely structural intervention. We have now a 25 to 40% decline in incidence in the majority of the districts in just the first 13 months of implementation. So this is what's possible when you listen to the people you're serving. And I think that was a huge lesson for me, and a huge lesson of how critical the private sector is in that partnership. And I think since then, we've been very intentional about our partnerships, from the Bush Institute partnership in cervical cancer to our new partnership for MenStar, recognizing that 50% of the men in sub-Saharan Africa are diagnosed late to the point where their disease cannot be completely controlled because they don't see themselves in the health center. So once again, we have to turn to the private sector to really help us with messages for men. We haven't been completely successful in the United States to get men to do preventive care, but we think that this could be a huge breakthrough in how we understand how to link men in their 20s and 30s into the healthcare delivery system, and we're excited about that challenge. But I think we try to be true and stay really true to the goals of PEPFAR, which was to actually change the course of the pandemic and constantly use information and data and triangulate it in unique ways to get us insights into how to do business differently. And so we've adapted that kind of business model, and it's been incredibly exciting. And I just look forward to hearing from all of you, and super thank you to the First Ladies. Every country where we have made progress, it has solely been because of the political will of the government to address the issues that are confronting them in an honest and real way, and to work with us to have the policy changes that make our US taxpayer dollars work. And you can really see the differences in countries where the president and first lady are leading along with the ministries and sometimes pulling them along, and where it doesn't happen. And so we're really grateful to the Bush Institute and others for really engaging first ladies in this dialogue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, let me open it. First, we're going to talk a little bit about these issues that are impacting adolescent girls and women around the world. And I'd love for us to dig in a little bit to this connection between the issues of education and gender-based violence and the effects that has on health and well-being for girls and women. So if I might, Carolyn Miles, I hope you will be willing to weigh in on this question and tell everybody, obviously, who you're with and the work that you do.
Sure. So I'm Carolyn Miles. I'm the CEO of Save the Children. And the issues, I think, for girls are really at the heart of what Save the Children is trying to do over the next 15 years. So we've made a commitment that we want to end preventable deaths of children under 5. We want every child to be in a high-quality early education, be able to get a high-quality early education, at least through primary school, and learn to read and write. And we want to protect kids from harm. And if you look at any of those three things, girls are always at the end of the line. So if you look at health, if you look at education, if you look at protection, girls are always at the end of the statistics. So for us, focusing on girls is not only, to me, it's obviously the right thing to do, but it is also the thing that is going to make us successful in terms of the outcomes we want for children. And so this idea of reaching every last girl, health is really at the heart of that, those issues. And when you look around the world, we work in 120 countries around the world, and oftentimes we're working with mothers, of course, because if you want to influence children, you're going to work with their mothers, and making sure that mothers are getting access to that basic health care. I mean, this starts with access. This starts with just being able to get to a health clinic. And I was in South Sudan last month and visiting our programs there. And, you know, so many women are just unable to actually even get to health care. Now there you have all sorts of issues. You have conflict, you have a drought, you have deep, deep poverty, but these are things that stop women from just accessing basic health care for their children. So it starts with basic care. And I think for governments to actually be able to know where the needs are the greatest, we have to do better on data. So we have to really make sure we're investing in data. Sex disaggregated data, really important, so we know what's happening between boys and girls, women and men. So that's one piece that I think is really important. The second piece that's really important when we think about the continuation of care is actually early marriage. So if you look around the world, most every country where we work, there's a law against getting married under the age of 18. But if you look around the world, the majority of girls living in poor countries are married before the age of 18. So laws are not enough. You actually really have to change behaviors. And so that is a big push for us, because that early marriage, first of all, it ends education for that girl. Second of all, that girl is likely to have a child when she's 14 or 15 if she gets married when she's 13. That child is less likely to be healthy, and we start the whole cycle over again. So early marriage is really an issue that we are taking on in a very, very big way, and it's related to health, it's related to education, it's related to the future of girls and the next generation of women. In terms of adolescence, and I know there's lots of experts here on adolescent sexual reproductive health, all I would say on that issue is that, again, access is so important, and in so many countries where we work, this is obviously still a very difficult subject for families, and so making sure that girls particularly have access to information about their reproductive health and access to services. Oftentimes you have to make sure that those services are done in a very different way for adolescents. It's not just set it up at the clinic and people are, you know, adolescent girls are going to come. That typically doesn't happen. So making sure that you're having very adolescent sensitive programs so that girls will actually show up to the clinic is really important. And then finally, I think just the underlying issue here is one of equity. So if we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, which obviously there's going to be a lot of discussion about this week, and we think about all of those goals, all 17 goals and 169 targets and all the other things that go into the SDGs, at the heart of those goals is equity. And I would say that we are still a long way in terms of really driving gender equity particularly. So in all of those goals, I think that is a really key underlying factor. So let me stop there, because I know we have lots of great speakers.
Thank you, Carolyn, very much. If I might, I would love to turn to any or all of our First Ladies who have platforms in their countries, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the issues you all are facing and what you are seeing for adolescent girls in your countries, and effective ways that you might be working on some of these issues.
So thank you so much for having us here, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel discussion. We find in the Caribbean that we share a lot of the same issues that are affecting our girls throughout the region, and from what I'm hearing, it's not just in the Caribbean, but across the world, where gender-based violence continues to be a main, continues to be one of the main things that is affecting our girls. We have so many of the issues stems from that, from destroying that self-confidence of that young person, and then it just spirals into a whole number of different issues. The girl ends up with in an abusive relationship, of course, and then it goes into getting infected because they find love in an older person, and the issues just gets worse and worse and worse. So when we looked at establishing the S-Clan organization, we really were working from before with the other First Ladies in the Caribbean and looking at the different issues that were affecting our girls. And we came up with the 4 main issues. Of course, HIV and AIDS, trying to eliminate mother-to-child transmission because it really is important. We have, of course, gender-based violence, cervical cancer. Thankfully, in Belize, we were able to introduce the HPV vaccine, and it was well received. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of education. I think what really made it successful was the partnership with the government, the church, the organizations that were directly involved. And it really is important that whatever we do, it has to be in partnership with the different organizations. There's no way that not one organization or one government will be able to eliminate or address all of these issues successfully. I mean, I know we have a lot of speakers, but so I'll just pass it on to someone else.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. As First Lady from Belize already said, it is an absolute honor to be here. I would like to share a couple of things, just taking some of the words from the 2 previous speakers, and is that I believe that in Colombia we're also getting the feeling of this need for collaboration and cooperation. And one of the things that for me was very surprising when actually I've been in the government just for 30 days or so. So let's say I'm brand new on this. But one of the things that really caught my attention was that we started feeling that it was like the momentum for all the foundations, organizations, like everybody was willing to help. And we identified that there were so many foundations, organizations, and the private sector working together already. Just they haven't really taken the chance to sit together and organize themselves for a specific and targeted purpose. And what we're willing to do right now and to work with is precisely to help the coordination and linking like foundations and entrepreneurships, as I said before, and just working together as a chain. Because we realized already that some of them were working, let's say, on early childhood. Then there were a gap between, let's say, infants and adolescents. But then we start again on innovation and other sort of programs for boys and girls above 20 years old. And we identified a gap, like, it was actually like a timeline that stops at some point. And that's the reason why we're willing to lead the possibility of linking this whole community willing to help with one purpose, and is let's work together, organize ourselves, and be able to pull a whole generation. Let's just not work for the childhood, leave them unattended, and appear when there's a problem, when they get older. So let's just try to work together and be able to walk with them and walk them through the whole path. That's the only way we feel we can really be engaged with a generation without like leaving gaps in between the growth and the formation of a human being. And of course, one of the things that we notice as well is that there's, you mentioned inequality. For us, there's something that always caught my attention about early pregnancies, and it's like, I don't know, if I'm being imprudent, but I believe it's something very common in Latin American countries, and is that, oh, well, there's a girl who got pregnant. No? So who's the one who ruined her life? The girl. It doesn't go beyond that. Well, a child is not born out of one girl. There's also someone else involved. So there goes equality from the very beginning. So that's something that also we're willing to work on it and try to start and thinking that a family grows out of at least two people.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate your point about I hope you'll take an active role as First Lady in convening all of those organizations, because I will say that is one of the things that we found working for First Lady in the United States, and still find today as a former First Lady, that there's a significant role to be played in bringing together all the different organizations working on issues. Madam First Lady.
Thank you. Well, I want to add to what my colleague Kim Barrow said, because I think we recognize that we are dealing with resource challenges and other challenges that come from being small island and low-lying developing states, which are at the mercy of increasingly violent weather issues. For instance, the case of the island of Dominica, which was completely devastated last year by hurricane, and it hasn't recovered yet. So how does that contribute? So the spouses of CARICOM Leaders Action Network, which is S-Clan, to which we belong, decided that we have to work together and use the resources we have, share information and ideas. And because we're also not only coping with HIV infection, which is now being accompanied by congenital syphilis, we are also coping with an increase in NCDs among our population. With HIV, we have continued stigma and discrimination, which impacts people getting tested, people accessing the ARVs when they are diagnosed, because they're afraid of what people will say or do to them. So we have been partnering with local and international agencies. In my own case, I work with NGOs at home and in collaboration with the ministries of public health and social protection to formulate my programs and develop projects to tackle issues such as teenage pregnancy, where we have projects to empower and educate young girls and help them return to school if they want to do that, or learn a trade, and to move on with their lives, but most importantly, to develop a belief in themselves that they can do the things they want to do. We are also looking at the future of our country, so I'm also involved in the STEM Robotics, STEM Guyana campaign, and teaching our kids robotics so they can be active participants in the global economy as they grow older. We are also very lucky that Gilead Science has partnered with us and is helping us to develop two projects. The one in Guyana is similar to the PEPFAR Dreams project, and the one in Belize is focusing on HIV incidences in the south of Belize, as well as the assistance we have received from Gilead in setting up our organization. But we have been partnering with and received support from various international agencies, UNAIDS, UNICEF, UNFPA, PAHO, and of course PEPFAR, to address the issues. We also have the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV/AIDS, which has worked very fully for us and is very competent. It has been recognized as a global best practice. So we are fortunate in that respect, that although we are small and little states which might not gain any attention on their own, but together we can accomplish much. I believe that women, since we lack Y chromosomes, tend to be much more pragmatic and open to ideas and partnerships that will provide long-term solutions to the issues that we face. We also, as First Ladies, whether we like it or not, are under the microscope nationally. People are looking at everything we do or say. And therefore, if we adopt a position of leadership and are guided by those who know more than we do, because I am not a health person, our voices on health issues that affect our women and girls and our young people will be held, and our actions to aid their education and empowerment will be heard and noted. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Through the sharing of resources and information and experiences and ideas and collaboration with forward-thinking groups of people, we can develop targeted programs and projects which address our specific social and economic needs and move us more quickly and effectively towards the achievement of our goals. Thank you.
So I want to come back to something that Save the Children came up with and started with, and the rest of the First Ladies have weighed in with. And this, when you start looking at sex and age disaggregated data, which all of our data on the website is by sex and disaggregated by age, which I think is also really critically important. And when you see that the intersection of a lot of the issues comes down to, in many cases, rape of young children between 9 and 14, or sexual violence that continues, and that's what's resulting in the teen pregnancies and the early marriage. How is it more difficult for the foundations and the private sector to approach issues from that, some of those core issues that may be more difficult to talk about? Or can the private sector and foundations really have that kind of dialogue with ministries and with leadership in the country? Because I'll never forget, in like 1970, they finally figured out that women actually had decision-making of how things were spent in the household. And then all of a sudden, there were commercials gauged to us after there was nothing gauged to us. I think they even found out that we actually buy cars, which I think was a shock to a lot of our male colleagues. So is there a sense that throughout the world, women are making a lot of the financial decisions and then are really going to be important in private sector decisions? And are you tapping into that dual empowerment piece that will empower young girls and protect them in that vulnerable time and then continue throughout their adolescence and early 20s?
I think women make financial decisions, but then we have a large group of them who do not have the power or the economic base to make the decisions that they need to make about their health and well-being, or even their economic progress, or the progress of their children. But the data show that once women advance financially, they bring their whole families with them. And I keep telling people, I said, these are the data that we have. We have about 90%, women spend 90% of their earnings on their families, and men spend 30 to 40%. So there's the logic of it. So we have to start thinking, how do we get our women educated? And one of the things we battle with is against the issues such as health and family life education in schools. We have people in our education system who feel that you just want to teach the kids about sex. We're saying, no, this is about their health. This is their personal well-being, and we have to work with that. Fortunately, our Ministry of Health at home in Guyana, where I'm from, has worked on what's the word they use? Reincorporating girls in the secondary school system, teen mothers. We're working on getting information about our HPV vaccine because that has been another issue. People are very resistant to change. So I think we have to use our platform to let people know that these things are all right, and they advance women. And if we advance the women, we are advancing our societies. But you touched on something that we were very concerned with from the inception, data. We need to get empirical data so that we know where we're going and that where we focus our energies would be in the right direction. That's a key issue for us. Thank you.
Pam, I'm hoping if you're not going to address this question, I'm going to add one to you. But I would love for you to build off of Debbie's question. ExxonMobil is not a natural company to be working on women and girls. So I'm hopeful you can educate us on why that is the case, that you are involved in this, and why you personally make the case for investments in women and girls?
Well, I think all companies should be involved in women and girls. And we have done a lot of research on this. We've supported a lot of research on it. And, just as you said, women give back. They give back to their communities, 90%. The communities flourish. If the communities flourish, then it's good for business. And truthfully, we operate in a lot of communities. Our employees are from those communities, our employees from all over the world, many of which represented by some of the first ladies here. So, it's important for us. It's important for us to have a role in this space. So back in about 2005, we started the Women's Economic Opportunity Initiative. And since then, we've invested about $120 million on women in developing countries. Lots of programs across the board on leadership. And it's really this, back to your private, public partnership with NGOs, with governments, with, other corporations to really try to advance it. And I work Africa. So I've worked Africa for many years. I worked Americas. I worked in 24 different countries. So I have seen the impact that women can have. I personally have seen it. And, it's just amazing to see what women can do. I was able to travel last year, I guess it was, with the Bushes to Namibia, and to see some of the programs that have occurred there. I was just in Tanzania with a program called Solar Sister. And, it incorporates exactly what you're talking about. It's women entrepreneurs. If you look at Africa, over 600 million people don't have access to reliable energy. So these women entrepreneurs it's nonprofits, sell these lanterns. And when we interviewed them, these are Maasai women in the middle of nowhere. And they said it helps us feed our children. It helps us educate the children from the profits. And one of the things we heard is it gives them self-empowerment. And so, all of that, it's just good for all of us. It's good for humanity, but it is the right things to do. And it's the right thing for all businesses to do, in my mind. So, and I applaud the First Ladies who are doing it. We're very thankful we were able to sponsor the role of A Role Without a Rule book for the First Ladies. And to me, the platform that you have is just incredible to affect change in your countries. And we look forward to working with you. I know the Bush Foundation does, and it's such a key part of it. And I think your comment, together we can accomplish much, is the right word for this group.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with this amazing power and of this positive energy I'm getting. I'm a scientist. I'm an advisor to His Excellency, the President of Islamic Development Bank. Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral bank. It's not a commercial bank. We serve 57 countries, 4 continents, 1.6 billion. 26 of the 57 least developed country, and over 67% women. So when I came, I love the discussion here, and there's so many points. I just want to let you know how, as a scientist and being in a power in financial institution, how that gave me the tools to really, hopefully, we're making a huge difference. The first, when I came to the bank, I thought that 2 amazing initiatives should be really done especially for entrepreneurship and especially for women, to set up online platform, because that you reach more people around the world. So connectivity. So we have an initiative called Engage. And the second thing, we started a Transform Fund, where we really empower entrepreneurs. And I'm happy to tell you, yesterday we decided in the top 30 is about $500 million fund. And one of the initiatives, amazing by a woman, who are really empowering 67% of the population of the all female doctors to have a job after they graduated, because they didn't have a job. So this type of innovative solution. So we invest in this Transform Fund 6 SDG. One of them, health, education, water, sanitation, and food security and infrastructure. And also we're empowering another institution because we believe at the Islamic Development Bank by empowering people, by giving them the right tools to be in charge. So we believe if you make a woman independent financially and economically, she will be healthier because that's the fact. And so by doing what we are really sponsor another NGO or an institute to train a woman in a rural area who doesn't read and write to be solar engineer, because they go back and they become change agent, they empower the whole village. I also, with the STG, is a great thing happened for women because we're missing women to be in a leadership position in terms of science and innovation and engineering, because if having women in a decision maker of how the direction of science, we won't have a laser killer beam, we won't have a nuclear weapon. And STG give us the amazing platform to really resonate with women, because if they know she wanted to become an engineer to produce or invent something to become renewable energy or cleaning water for 3 million children who die every year, there's an incentive for women because to resonate with them. So, and also we changed the whole scholarship program to more be accessible for women under the umbrella of sustainability science. And this year we celebrate the 20th anniversary of a prize we give to individuals who really empower women in development. So the Islamic Development Bank really making sure that with the financial aid, lower the barrier of accessibility for medicine, and also how we can give that for free. And we're going to initiate a new initiative from next month for breast cancer treatment and cervical cancer, when we give for free the vaccine and the treatment in an area that women cannot access to medical doctors or even clinic, or even to the $10 you can save a woman's lives. And they have no accessibility. So we are engaging with PPP, with NGOs, as you mentioned. You cannot do that alone. And if we were going to collect all the money to address the the Sustainable Development Goals, we need 3 trillion. And if we collect the money for all the multilateral bank, and even from the World Bank, we're only going to get to $1.9 billion. It's not enough. So we need that partnership. We need innovative ideas. We need to have women actually to design the direction of science and engineering. And I said also, I'm ambassador for science and STEM for girls in UNESCO. So I sit in many platforms and I see how girls deprived from accessibility to go to school because of time of the month, or they come from the wrong part of the world, or they get early, be forced to get married, and they have the missed opportunity. So they need to have opportunities. So I stop here, and then maybe I can add something.
Thank you, Dr. Sindi, for that work you are doing. We will go to Felicity and then to Seema. Felicity.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from RNW Media. We have a SRHR platform called Love Matters. And I'm so excited to be here to hear all these words, gaps, innovation, partnerships. And our platform connects young women to SRHR information, scientifically based, all over the world. So we have platforms in Mexico, in China, in Kenya, in Uganda, in Rwanda. And we're able to bridge that gap between the service providers and SRHR information, which is scientifically valid, which is proven. But we also speak in their language. So we've been discussing about financial inclusion of women. For women to be active participants in their countries, they need to be healthy. If we have a high level of teenage pregnancies and women don't know what to do about contraception, we need them to access that information in a language that they understand at their point of need. And that's what Love Matters does. We provide that platform for young people to talk to each other, for young people to be referred to services. We have so much money being put into these countries through PEPFAR, through Save the Children. And it's amazing, the interventions are amazing, but they're at the acute point. So it's when something has gone wrong, when there is a disease. We're able to provide a platform for young people to talk about those issues before they get there. They get advice from our moderators that leads them to better decisions. We build a community so they can discuss issues, relationships, sex, things to do with finance, gender-based violence. So I'm really loving that there's a commitment from people, from leaders of state, in innovation, in reaching young people at their place of need. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Seema Kumar from Johnson & Johnson. I hope you all know Johnson & Johnson. We are the mother and baby company, 130 years old, and we've, for all those years, we've been champions of women and girls and children. And we have multiple different programs in multiple different countries all over the world. And Ambassador Birx has already mentioned PEPFAR Dreams program, which we're a part of, as well as the Men's Star program, which we also signed up for, and many, many other things. One of the things is that, at the end of the day, women actually, whether they are recognized that way or not, or paid or not, tend to be the chief financial officers of their families and their communities. They tend to be the chief medical officers of their families and communities. And they also tend to be the chief nutrition/development officers of their families because, whether it's health of their children, poverty, nutrition, they are at the center. They are the catalysts. And I think that which is why I think it makes sense to have gender parity as a goal for our sustainable development goals. We also, as a healthcare company, believe that health is a foundation for a better world. Women, we believe, are a foundation for a better world. So the health of women and the empowerment of women is extraordinarily important for us. And so 2 or 3 things I'll mention. One is, and all of these 3 things have one thing in common, that is that as we've all been saying, we can't do this alone. And so public-private partnerships are really, really critical. And the things I'll mention have to do with innovation. Technology is offering us just unbelievable possibilities. And so newly diagnosed mothers, we're connecting them through technology, through a program, a collaboration with Mothers to Mothers, so that mothers who are HIV positive can mentor other mothers who've just been newly diagnosed. And then pregnant women who find out they're pregnant can use technology through Mom Connect and through WhatsApp. They get all of the information they need for their babies. And in fact, the government of South Africa has adopted that particular platform as a way to really, as the official government platform. But in addition, also, when it's not only the expectancy of your baby, but also it's about sometimes people find out they're HIV positive at the same time. So technology is providing us multiple different opportunities. The second example I'll mention is in the arena of STEM, and we partner with multiple different organizations in Africa, and through our J Labs and our innovation centers are doing these sort of innovation challenges. And it's just phenomenal, the amount of entrepreneurship we see all across, and especially in women. And so empowering women that way has also been just, extraordinary. Then finally, I'll mention one program near and dear to all of our hearts at Johnson & Johnson, and that is the program that we're working on, one of the largest public-private partnerships that we're engaged in to develop an HIV vaccine. And so I think probably everybody here knows that about 1,100 women are diagnosed with HIV every day, and 70% of them tend to be in the poorer parts of sub-Saharan Africa. And so our vaccine is now in clinical trials in South Africa, is designed to study 2,600 adolescent girls and young women. And they are high-risk population because of all of the things we've talked about, including gender violence, and keeping fingers crossed that when we get the results that it'll be, good news. So thank you for letting me share some of the things that we do.
Thank you, Seema. Madam First Lady, we'll turn to you, and then Carmen.
I would just like to build up a little bit on some of the ideas that have been raised here. And one is, and I consider this really important, at least looking at our country specifically, and is that one of the few things that we noticed at the very beginning was that something was going on with the way we communicate our policies, our projects, or our programs, especially speaking about youth. So one of the targets right now is to really get to the right language. and how we get our interests really into their brains, commitments, and intentions. So I've seen this probably common in many countries, is that we try to share the information with some tints, like either morality, religious. So we said, why don't we try to just start sharing facts, technical and scientific information that will lack any other issues such as religion, moral, ethics, and just try to focus on things that have no questions, and is focus on technical and scientific information, and try to get it so simple and so positive to get to the right target with the right language. The other thing is that, speaking about the alliances and cooperation between public and private sector, is that it is definitely a faster and efficient way to go when you realize that some of the most difficult things to get is data. But it's even worse to get the right use out of it. And in the case of our country, we found out that many of the foundations and companies, organizations, together with the government, had a lot of data. We just needed to find a way to make it measurable, to realize the right way to get to the impact that the projects and programs were causing in our society. And finally, the fact that definitely, speaking about financial improvement and entrepreneurship, there's several studies that shows that companies, all sort of entrepreneurships and programs definitely have certain common factors when they're led by women, and is that they're efficient, they have equity on their teams, they are sustainable and financially sometimes twice more efficient than other entrepreneurships that haven't been led by women. So I think those are factors that would definitely impact economies and development in our countries.
Thank you. Carmen, let's turn to you and the work of Merck.
Sure, thanks. Carmen Villar, I'm from Merck. And I just, we've heard a lot of different themes throughout the discussion today. We started with Ambassador Birx and hearing a little bit about MenStar and men's health, and really thinking about who influences men's health, right? It's usually the mom or the sister or the aunt or the wife. I met a guy recently in a car, in a taxi, who said, I was so mad at my wife because she scheduled my colonoscopy and didn't tell me. And I thought, well, you're 50, you should go. You're not going to get any sympathy from me. So really thinking about the woman at the center of this nucleus of family and community and world and what that means. We talked about early marriage and what that means for giving birth and having children and birthing order and so forth, and all those things that come along with that. And then how do we get exposure to women in leadership, and how do we encourage the education programs and the women to get educated and make these significant innovative contributions to the world? That's about exposure to leaders, right? To women who we see doing, so we follow. And Carrie I don't think is ready for this, but to see, when I worked in government, to see people like Carrie and Ambassador Birx in these great leadership positions, to know that I could do what they could do someday, and really see them as role models. And I think the problem is that women can't do any of that if they're not surviving, if they're not healthy. And I bring that up because in 2011, Merck started something called Merck for Mothers, and really looking at the reasons why women were dying in childbirth and trying to address that globally. And we've made a lot of progress, but that was in 2011. It was a $500 million commitment for 10 years. We're getting close to the end of that 10 years, and we're starting to think about What did we learn from that? What is sustainable? What do we have to see fully to fruition to make sure it works? Because sustainability is really what this is about, right? If we don't have the systems, we can't get products out as private industry. If we don't have the systems in place, we can't, help create financial systems for women. I mean, this is the core of what we have to do and why the partnership is so important. But oftentimes it's a woman at the center of that, at the core of that, and making sure that they stay alive. They get us to where we need to be. They give us the exposure and the leadership, and the technology and the innovation that we know that they're bringing. It's really important. So it's not always financial, but they often are at the core of everything.
Okay, so we have 5 people with their placards raised. Carolyn Reynolds, Felicity, Carrie, Betsy, and Carolyn Miles. I want to tee up 2 particular topics that you can or cannot address, but that I want to make sure we raise. And Debbie, I'll ask you if you have anything to add to this. First is examples of where we've actually made progress and where we've seen effective public-private partnerships. And number 2 is this issue that we've talked about a little bit of actually engaging adolescent girls and young women themselves in the conversation, and how we can do that in a more sustainable way, and advice you all have for us as we think about this issue going forward. So let's start with Carolyn Reynolds over here.
So
Debbie,
No, that's good.
I ignored you.
No.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'm Carolyn Reynolds with PATH, and we work on global health innovations, bringing those to scale in many countries around the world, partnering with PEPFAR and many of our U.S. government partners, but also everything we do. Actually, almost every health issue that we work on involves a public-private partnership, or as we like to say, multi-sector partnership. Because we think it actually is that combination of bringing the government, public sector together with the private sector, but organizations such as ours that are social sector that actually are often that connective tissue that makes those partnerships work, to make sectors, those 2 sectors which often don't speak the same language and don't know, work on very different mindsets and models to be able to bring them together for effective change. So. I actually wanted to make sure that we underscored one of the points that Debbie, you led off with, which is that I quoted you to say, all the progress we've made has been solely possible because of political will. And that, I think, just underscores everything we're talking about when we're talking about political will to actually make the commitments to drive the change we want to see, political will to form the right partnerships to bring the necessary actors and financing and solutions together, and political will to drive that leadership through to fruition. We know if we take the issue of HPV, for example, we know there's that we have the solutions. We also know that we've got to continue to work on better solutions and tools. And we've got to, if we have the potential to save millions of lives, but we also have a backlog of 700 million women who have not who've not benefited from screening and from vaccines, or are out of the age of potential for priority ages for vaccines. So we've got to continue to innovate. We're working on I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I've got 2 young girls, and I think having just gone through I barely remembered to continue to bring her back for her 3 doses of her HPV vaccine. And I think, how is a mother in a country, in a remote village in Africa, who's already finds it difficult enough to get to the health clinic once, thinking about taking her daughter back for multiple doses of vaccine? So there's real promise for that innovation in the next few years to really be a game changer. In the meantime, we have to continue to make sure we don't leave behind all the women and young girls who have not benefited from vaccines, and to continue to innovate on ways to screen and treat. There's potential. One of the things we're working in more than 5 countries to help scale up not only delivery of the existing vaccine, but also to continue to look at systems innovations, work with countries to leverage things like breakthroughs in women being able to collect their own samples so that we can accelerate screening and treating. So innovation obviously is the core, as we've been talking about, partnerships, but political will and leadership, we can have all the solutions that we want and it won't matter if we don't have not only the political will to start, but to see it through. Leaders come and go, but these are issues and solutions we're dealing with that have to be sustained, commitments that have to be sustained from government to government. And it's not just political will, but then it's the accountability of those leaders. And so that's where citizen engagement comes in, and empowering both putting female leaders, not just in business and in science, but also in parliaments and local assemblies, to be able to drive those right decisions, and but citizens, women in their communities, to be able to be in positions where they can hold and engage male and female leaders, but to hold them to account. I was just in Kenya a few weeks ago with a fantastic local assembly, local parliamentarian leader at the county level, and such a passionate young woman. These are the people who are going to drive and sustain and ensure that we make change. Seeing through the progress we've already, PATH has been proud to be part of partnering with with PEPFAR to reach more than 80,000 women on the DREAMS program in Western Kenya. But we've got to double and triple and quadruple that reach over the next several years. So I think whatever we do, it is innovation, but political will and accountability that we have to make sure that we prioritize. And too often, that is actually the missing ingredient that we forget about, that if we don't have the leadership and we don't have that sustained over time, we won't continue to make progress.
I just want to come back to that point because it was made by our First Lady from Colombia and several other First Ladies. When you're trying to push the envelope in a new place, I know today I wouldn't be able to maintain that intergovernmental work that we do across all these agencies without current administration support. Because the minute they sense you don't have it, then everybody goes off into their corners and says, well, she doesn't have any support at the White House, so we don't have to actually do it. Right. I think what the private sector can teach all of us is how they constantly matrix manage in a way, and how First Ladies and governments, particularly presidents and First Ladies, are the only really voice that can force the ministers to work together. And when you're trying to work horizontally between ministries of education, ministries of genders, and ministries of health, we need a convener like that. And private sector can also deliver those messages to the ministries of finance, because these are the horizontal groups that don't often get the same messages, but if they heard it similarly, the reoccurring messages about women and girls and opportunities and everything that you're doing, making sure that those continue to get to the highest level of government and the importance of that. The private sector has unbelievable strength in that, as well as the foundations that are sitting around the table. So I think I really want to thank the First Ladies and for your comment to really, the lives of girls are horizontal, and our response has to be the same way. But it takes a convener. And that's where we're really looking at the First Ladies to support.
Okay, Carrie, did you still want to speak? Sure. We'll do Carrie, and then we'll move down
I want to address an issue that actually hasn't been raised, and that is the issue of trafficking of young girls. It's something that everyone thinks is somewhere else. It was striking to me the other day. I was speaking with the head of Boys and Girls Clubs in Washington, D.C., and she told me when she first came in, she thought that trafficking was only something that took place in the suburbs. And my overriding thought pattern going through my head at that moment was, I'm pretty darn sure that every suburban mom thinks the only place that trafficking happens is in the inner city. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So just a couple of points, because PCI works both domestically and internationally, and we find that we have so much to learn from the global experience back here at home, and likewise there's a lot we can learn from experience here to bring overseas. And so we are working as part of a very broad public-private partnership around anti-trafficking efforts in San Diego County, which is where our headquarters is. It was really led by the district attorney, who brought a very strong partnership that included and really focused on bringing the private sector to bear. And one of the most important things that the private sector is doing is we now have created a business alliance. These businesses are working together not only to use their corporate social responsibility to fund efforts around anti-trafficking, but they are themselves training every single one of their staffs because they realize that a lot of the buyers are actually employees. The research has shown that 70% in San Diego County, 70% of all dates for sex, which is all done online, by the way, take place on work property between the hours of 10 and 2. And so the business community has taken it upon themselves to really educate their staff about this and to create policies that make it against company policy to be able to access sex or to be surfing the internet. They also realize, and we're very much a part of this, that what we need to do is capture the parents, because parents need to be involved. Parents don't know how to talk to their kids about trafficking. What we realized from the National Institutes of Justice study in San Diego was that 60% of the kids who have been trafficked were living at home with their parents while they were being trafficked. And parents just didn't know about how to read the signals. And so the partnership between the businesses through the Business Alliance is really helping to focus education around tactics that traffickers use, how to have difficult conversations with your kid. Where can you look for support in your community with the school? And then I guess the last thing I would like to say is really just the critical importance of starting young. In San Diego County, there's evidence of kids as young as 6 years old being trafficked. So we have a program called Project Roots, which is gender-specific programs that really focus on training kids first about healthy relationships starting at age 8. We actually focus on kids age 8 to 12, focusing on healthy relationships, your body, unhealthy relationships, the issues that confront them every single day around gender violence and drug abuse and violence in the community. We are targeting those communities that are most at risk, and we're working very, very closely with the school system. In fact, it's all done in very close collaboration with the San Diego Unified School District. So it is a partnership that involves law enforcement, the faith community, business community, PTA, and a range of other partners, really starting young to make sure that everybody understands the depth of the problem and knows where to go when they determine it. So just wanted to add that. I also, I guess, just want to say one other thing, and that is that it has been a huge privilege to be able to partner both with the Bush Center and with PEPFAR around HPV testing and treatment in sub-Saharan Africa. And related to political will, and Debbie, you mentioned Malawi and the tremendous HIV results. I met recently with the head of the Malawian Defense Forces, and we're working with the Malawian Defense Forces on both HIV and HPV, but I was absolutely blown away by his understanding of the epidemic in his country and his commitment not only to HIV but also to HPV. He said he saw HIV as a leading threat to security in his nation. With that kind of commitment, you know, it's no surprise to me that Malawi is, you know, such good, strong results.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Betsy, let's turn to you.
Great, thank you. I'm Betsy McCallon. I'm the CEO of the White Ribbon Alliance. Our mission is to activate a people-led movement for reproductive, maternal, and newborn health and rights. So as the name implies with Alliance, it is all about partnerships, and particularly getting outside of just the health sector, really recognizing that these issues won't be tackled, left to health experts and clinical interventions alone. I want to I'll give one example of a partnership and then also respond a bit to Holly's question about really engaging girls and women in design. On partnership, we have a fantastic partnership going with Birx, focused on self-care for girls and women. Which is really about ensuring that they have the knowledge and confidence to take decisions about their own health care, as well as that of families and communities, as others have said, but also to really have the confidence to ask those questions and demand the kind of quality health that they deserve. What I have really enjoyed about the partnership is twofold. One is that I think, as others have mentioned, as a consumer-facing business, there's a recognition that the people themselves know what they want and know best, as well as the kind of, so the design, the trust in really that the design of the programs be done in each community and be very much driven by the needs identified in each of the communities, from a messaging perspective, but also from a strategies and approach perspective, and taking both a very community grassroots perspective, but also coupling that with the policy perspective. The second thing that I think is really exciting about it is that, unlike some of the partnerships that we're often in with, with government or foundations or others who may have to take a much shorter term view, that the partnership of White Ribbon Alliance and Birx takes that long-term view of really that recognizing that it's investing in the empowerment of girls and women that is going to really transform the system and be sustainable. So I think that's really exciting, and what we've seen from that is that it can then really leap forward progress. And a lot of the healthcare providers, district and regional managers that we work with have commented not only on the results that we have, but the fact that they've seen more progress in a year of this kind of collaborative approach than in 30 years of just doing things the same way. On the question of really engaging girls and women in the design, we are currently running a campaign called What Women Want across the globe, and in all it does is seek to ask girls and women one question: what their number one ask is as it relates to quality reproductive and maternal health. What's fascinating are the results, but the process itself, the fact that they're surprised to be asked. Many of them have never been asked. No one has asked them their view, right, their opinion on that. And there's some skepticism, but also some real hope and energy around what that means. So the expectations they have on the health system are incredibly low in so many cases, and that's in itself pretty shocking, and I think, again, makes us think about what it's going to take in the long haul. We've heard probably on about equal measure the call for some of the basic things that Carolyn was talking about at the start of the conversation, not to have to share a bed when giving birth, very, very basic access. At the same time, and at the same level of response, has been the call to be listened to. That's their number one ask: to be listened to be treated with respect and dignity. So I think that's really powerful for all the reasons that others have mentioned, and again, as Ambassador Birx talked about, in terms of what that means if you actually design policies and programs that respond to what girls and women are calling for, but also for that political commitment and leadership and investment that is needed. It's fantastic in places where that exists, but it doesn't always exist. And so to really call and push for that means making visible those demands of girls and women standing up for themselves and calling for their political leaders to act. And I think increasingly in a lot of the countries where we're working, where there is some skepticism of the broader global community, that is what is going to make the difference, is girls and women really pushing for their leaders to act and holding them to account and partnering where there is the political will. Thanks.
Thank you, Betsy. Carolyn, you've been very patient. We'll turn to you. Felicity, so we're going to do Carolyn, we're going to do Andrew, and we'll go back to Felicity. Carolyn.
Great, thanks. This has been a great conversation, and thank you, Holly, for leading it. I just wanted to go back to answer your question on what works and a little bit more on the adolescent girls piece and the development of that. But I wanted to wrap it in this issue of self-esteem, because I think that is so important when we look at the future. And maybe going back to the role of the first ladies, particularly, because I think, you know, one of the things that's so important in the countries where we all work is seeing these role models and being able to see that there is a future here that's about something that's very different from what I'm experiencing right now. And so I think I would just reinforce that role that you all have as First Ladies to be able to take these discussions forward, and also to say to you, engage young women in those discussions if there's an opportunity to kind of bring them in to help you shape those discussions. It'll make a huge, huge difference, because you're the ones who are supporting, you know, the dreams of your children, and particularly, I think, girls. And speaking of dreams, I think the program, another role model that I think we have is Ambassador Birx, and the program, the Dreams program, I've had the honor of seeing it in a couple of countries. And again, going back to this issue of self-esteem, I went to visit 2 programs. One was with girls who were just entering that Dreams program, and so they were just a couple weeks in. Every single one of them had been working selling sex to buy food. Every single one of them. They were all between the ages of 13 and 16. And so in that first group, it was really about talking about what do you want your future to be like? How would you like this program to help you? A lot of conversation, but I have to say these girls were obviously traumatized, and it was a difficult thing to be part of, frankly, because you just couldn't, they were having a hard time articulating what they wanted, and it was just kind of starting. And then I went to see the same program that had been up and running with a different group of young women who had been in the program for 9 months. And it was just completely different. It was a completely different conversation. And those girls who now had a set of skills, they were all running small businesses. And this is a program that, again, is supported by Johnson & Johnson and many other partners, but they were all running small businesses, and it was completely different conversation with those girls. And they were talking about their future. They talked about how in their family they had a different, there was a different dynamic with their parents, with their fathers, with their brothers. They had economic power. So just a completely different conversation. So I think that issue of self-esteem and of agency, I guess, if you will, is just, I just can't say enough about how important that is in the world we all work in.
Thank you. That's an important issue. Andrew, let's turn to you.
Yeah, just 2 things to build on that. One on adolescent girls, and secondly on what works. On adolescent girls, we produced a report yesterday with Girl Effect, which is the first global study on access to mobile for adolescent girls. We know there's a big gender gap in terms of male to female ownership. Around about 300 million more men than women own mobiles globally, and with all that comes with that, access to education, access to finance, access to employment. But this was the first study, 3,000 interviews across 20 countries, and the headline from that was boys are 1.5 times more likely to own mobiles than girls, and over 50% of girls are borrowing mobile in order to get access to connectivity and all that comes with it. Obviously, there's a big security issue around that, and I think one of the compelling things that came through for us is that most girls are using mobile for calculators and voice and text. So none of the other stuff that comes with mobile internet is being used by girls. And we launched a partnership yesterday with Girl Effect to get 7 million girls in 8 Vodafone markets on the Springster platform, which is their informal learning platform, which is absolutely key. I think the second thing is what works. About 7 years ago, we started using mobile money as a way of bringing women with obstetric fistula to hospital in the center of Dar es Salaam. We began it with 30 women. They put the ambassadors of the hospital onto mobile money, onto M-Pesa. When an ambassador or volunteer found a woman with the condition, they phoned up the hospital, they jointly diagnosed. And the first time I saw it, there were 30 women in a ward, 25 of whom had come to hospital via mobile money. The money had been sent to the ambassador, they bought a bus ticket, and the woman had come to hospital for surgery. We took this to Ambassador Birx, to PEPFAR, through a USAID grant, and prevention is better than cure. We wanted to operationalize this in the rural communities for an obstetric crisis service. And we did a McKinsey study of a few months ago, 27% reduction in maternal mortality in the Lake Zone area. as a result of the grant that we received, as a result of the program. And now the World Bank is looking at a $200 million investment into a national rollout in Tanzania of what we call our ambulance taxi service, where we're using mobile money to register taxis as ambulances to enable women in obstetric crisis to get to rural clinics and to get to the treatment they need. So it does work. We're immensely grateful. Certainly the women I've met are even more grateful, for this partnership. And I think mobile is absolutely key to the debate, and the sector is absolutely key in delivering some of the change we want to see.
Felicity, we'll turn to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of give a roundabout summary of some of the points that came up. Going back to public-private partnerships, so often with the interventions that we hold, programs come to an end, the political climate changes, and young people, young women don't have access or continued access to certain type of services. Say there's a change from HIV interventions to malaria, where private organizations can come in to bridge that gap and allow young people to continue with their care is particularly there. Organizations like ours who are able to carry young people through in those gaps of interventions, the multiple interventions that are there, are able to give consistent access to information to young people. And that's also reaching young people with mobile services, as Andrew just mentioned. Yes, young men have most of the access when it comes to cell phones, but those are the young men who create the pregnancies. Those are the people we also want to talk to support young women and to bridge those gaps that we have in care. The last point I have was about gatekeepers. So we have a lot of gatekeepers in our systems, be they religious gatekeepers, be they fathers in homes, be they nurses at the clinic with certain biases. If young people have a platform where they can talk about their issues and we can reach them and learn from those platforms, the kind of data on the way they behave, the way they access services, what worked for them, what didn't work. Those are the opportunities which are available for us. And I think they're easy wins and partnerships which we can develop that use innovation and private organizations in partnership with governments and bigger, more effective organizations. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll go to Dr. Sindi, and then Vivian, I'm giving you your warning, then I'm coming to you next.
Just I will be quick. I think one very important factor for stability or building the personality of confident women, because that's what really we lack, the role of family. When I was growing up, I had no role model around me. I always look at stories of Einstein and with the fuzzy hair and somebody like Mary Curie, it doesn't look like me. So I had to ask my father. The role of father is really crucial, and my family are the really human being, because I couldn't see anyone look like me around. And he used to tell me with his simple language, Hayat, with education, you can do anything you want in life. So he encouraged me for education. And I come very conservative family from Mecca. I never seen a lab. I never went to private school. And then when I was at Harvard, so in terms of the role model, yes, the first lady have an amazing role, but any one of us can be a true role model. Because also the school and girls, they want to see somebody just like them who made it, just to say to them, I went to education. And we had this campaign with Harvard, which selected 50 women to go around the rural area of America, when we lack the confidence for school. And I would just go and have a half-an-hour chat that you went to school and you went to college, and you won't believe how much positivity on the girls' enrollment, and they're sent back to you, and you have that, continuous relationship with them, and you can see that somebody went to Harvard, somebody went to, university, because they can see that just if I can make it, you can. The other point I want to make about the crucial of PPP, and I just want to give a simple example of the Islamic Development Bank in terms of health. Bangladesh is the city of rivers. So with the public sector, we converted 5 ships to be as a mobile clinic. Without them, we couldn't just reach far to girls and mothers and in rural area. And also we have a great partnership with Bill Gates and LLF Fund for polio vaccine to reach many people. So partnership is a crucial. As we mentioned, we cannot just do that alone, and we cannot invent the wheel. So women articulate, they never give up, and persistent. So we need to encourage that confidence in them.
Thank you. Okay, Vivian, you're going to help close this out for the day. As a dynamic young advocate, tell us what you've heard and what you would like to charge this group with and what should happen next.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. It's an honor to be here. My name is Vivian Onano. I'm a youth advocate. I'm Kenyan. First of all, again, congratulations to PEPFAR on the 15th year anniversary. Your work speaks for itself, and your partners have really elaborated the work that you're doing on the ground. A lot has been said regarding partnerships and collaborations, and we all agree that it's important for us to work together, from the private sector to the public sector to the civil society organizations to youth groups. And based on the conversation that we've had today, which has been very, very enriching, my statement will be the biggest threat to women's empowerment is poverty. Women continue to be the face of poverty when it comes to access to quality healthcare, economic empowerment, leadership, access to education. And we have to move past the conversations, and the partners have really elaborated on some of the initiatives that they're working on. Education is important. Education gives the girls a voice. Education empowers them. Education enlightens them. I am here today because of my education. I was born and raised by a single mother in rural Kenya, and at the time my mom did not have as much education, and I came from a community that did not value girls' education. So if it's not for the men and women of goodwill who invested in my education, today I'll be one of the 130 million girls who are languishing out in poverty, who have been denied an access to quality education and access to a better life. So education is really important. So as an ambassador for WaterAid, I had the opportunity to travel with them across West Africa. And the issue on menstrual hygiene, we are talking about girls' health today, sexual reproductive health rights, and the fact that there are some education systems that still do not allow teachers to talk about reproductive health shows that we still have a long way to go. In Mali, teachers are not allowed to talk about menstrual hygiene. So how is the girl supposed to know about her health? How is she supposed to know about how she's supposed to take care of herself when she starts going through her periods? And then I went to Burkina Faso, and it was still the same thing. It's a taboo. You cannot talk about menstrual hygiene in classrooms with the students. It's a big, big taboo. So if we talk about the education, we have to really start by empowering everybody, not only in the classroom, but also in the community. Make people understand that menstrual hygiene is not a taboo. It's a biological cycle. So why are we going to punish young girls for a biological cycle that they don't choose whether or not they want to go through it? It's a biological cycle. They have no control over it. So I had the opportunity of meeting with the community elders, meeting with the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Gender, and just shows you that when you're talking about women and girls issues, everybody has to be at the table. It's not only a government issue, it's not only a first lady's issue, it's not only a private sector issue, it's also about the community leaders. How are we engaging with the community leaders? Are we making sure that they have the right kind of information? Are we making sure that they understand the importance of the investment that we're trying to make in the lives of women and girls? So we can talk here, and it can be good talks, and we talk about big money, but if the community leaders don't really understand, and if we want to reach everybody and nobody's left behind, then we have to invest in them too. And it has to be in a language that they understand. And it's not about condemning them, but empowering them. So we have to also make sure the language that we're using, the tone that we are using in addressing them is empowering and not condemning, if we're really talking about lasting change in the communities. And also, how do you make sure that we empower girls to be role models for other girls? I was in Sierra Leone, and after the whole Ebola crisis, there's so many girls who fell pregnant after that. And then the government came up with the whole issue of girls who are pregnant cannot be allowed back to school. That is discriminative. And we're talking about political will. Political will is very important if we're going to address the issue of women and girls in inclusivity. So if the government itself says that girls cannot go back to school because they fell pregnant, and they're going to make other girls want to fall pregnant too, I mean, you are discriminating. And you're denying this girl a chance at a better life. I remember one of the speakers talked about the girl did not fall pregnant alone. So if you're saying the girl is not allowed to be in school, and probably the person impregnated her was the classmate. So this is a whole stigmatization, and we had the same case also in Tanzania when the president said that girls who are pregnant cannot be allowed back to school. So when you're talking about political will, and then the same people that we expect to change policies are making such barbaric statements and denying girls an access to opportunity, I mean, we are failing at the work that we're supposed to do. So that takes me back to my statement. We have to work with the people on the ground. We have to work with local organizations. We have to work with local leaders if we're going to have sustainable change. And the language has to be changed. The language has to be empowering and not condemning. And we have to make the girls feel like they have the choice over their lives. And that has also to do with the education system, how the language that's being used in the education system, how inclusive is the education system, how inclusive is the curriculum, how empowered are the teachers themselves to be able to address these issues. Because if you look at the village, the first person that a kid sees is a teacher. And any kid you'll ask, they want to be a teacher because that is the only career that they know of. So how are you investing in the teachers themselves when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights, access to technology? So a lot is happening. I am very positive that if we work together, we can have the change that we need to have in our society. And yes, the first ladies, I'm sorry, but you have a role to play. So far, you've been doing a good job, but we still need to hear your voices. We still need to see your offices need to be open. Because the other thing is, most of the time, the social issues are left to the first ladies to address. But if you don't have that platform to engage with the first ladies, it's really hard to have the change that you want to have or have that lasting change in the community. It's not all on you to do everything, but if we partner with the local communities and the local organization and the youth organization, then we can be able to talk about the lasting change that we really look for and aim for in our communities. But that being said, a lot is happening. I'm very positive, as always, as a young person. But I'm also glad to see the kind of partnerships that PEPFAR has been able to forge in the past 15 years and the work that's being done on the ground. So I think all I would say is for us to continue working together, be collaborative, be open to new ideas, be innovative, but work with the local communities. Thank you.
Vivian, thank you. Well, that was a great summary of the charge to this group. So Vivian, thank you for encapsulating that so well. Thank you all for being here and for this discussion. Debbie, any final words you would like to offer as well?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think sometimes we don't help each other by measuring each other's data. And I think what we have been really committed to when you're working with with girls and young women is to measure those indicators for each other. It's not just a matter of saying we're collaborating, but specifically we should be measuring, and we do now, the incidence of child marriage, incidence of pregnancy. We measure all of these items as well as our HIV incidence so that we can share with ministries in a horizontal way. And my real call to the private sector and the private foundations are, if you have something that's promising, we have to move from pilots or a district level to scale. That's the only way we're going to have impact. And we need a better communication methodology rather than reading it in a glossy paper. So we need to have the technology where those solutions are rapidly translated when we talk about, if everybody can be on their phones, then we could be on some place where we can transmit information in a more transparent, horizontal way so these things can be taken to scale. So I really thank you for your insights.
Thank you all for being here today.